You know what time it is, everybody. It is the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Steele and Flip, Friday edition, a wrap-up of the wild week in the NHL, non-stop, jam-packed action from start to finish all week long. Free agency frenzy, trades, signings. Johnny Gaudreau goes to the Columbus Blue Jackets. Steele and I have a lot to say about that. Today's episode will also feature a look at the signing of Ondrej Palat, Josh Norris, and a whole lot more, including a wrap-up of all the free agents still left that are viable. Let's get right into it, everybody. Happy Friday.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for being here today, everybody, for the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, Friday edition. A fitting way to end what has been a very entertaining week of news and transactions in the world of hockey. And we're here to break it all down on today's episode. Steele and I have your back because this is the point in time that you do not want to miss any of the even peripheral moves, because they could mean the difference for you down the stretch come fantasy championship time. And we are all about stacking that paper on this show, whether it be bets, fantasy, or otherwise. So make sure you continue to hammer that subscribe button and the follow button. And we really appreciate that love. And thank you for making us your first listen every single day. I've been keeping these intros short, Steele, because of all the topics that we have to get to. But just so everyone is aware, we're breaking down Johnny Gaudreau, Ondrej Palat, Josh Norris, and a roundup of all the free agents that are still left on the market. Nazem Kadri's out there. John Klingberg is out there. There's a couple of under-the-radar targets that with the right fit, Steele, again, these are fantasy targets you want to have an eye on. So don't slip or sleep. Today's episode is where you want to be. And Steele, where I want to be is right alongside you talking about fantasy hockey and breaking it all down. You know it's been a bit of a long day for both of us, but we're back in the lab, and let's start it off by talking about the head-scratching move that is Johnny Gaudreau going to Columbus. And I'm going to put it right there, and you let me know what you think about that right off the jump right there, my friend.
Look, I'm still a little shocked. I woke up this morning rubbing my eyes. I'm like, was that a dream? Did that actually happen? And of course, obviously it did, but I think we're all still pretty shocked. You know, I watched the press conference with Johnny Gaudreau with the Columbus Blue Jackets organization.
Yes.
And you know, I was kind of intrigued that he was holding back a little bit on some of the information on why he decided to go to Columbus, but just pretty much saying that at the time with him and his wife, they talked about it for a long time, and it got down to the wire. He said like the night before at 11 o'clock, that's really when he made his decision to join the Columbus Blue Jackets. But it is a real head scratcher, because when you actually look at this, from a contract standpoint, he left like $10 to $15 million on the table there. Like he did not care about the money whatsoever. He just did not want to be in Calgary anymore.
But here, let me throw this right back at you. If you don't care about the money, then what do you care about? And I understand that it's either the competitive fit or money. And I don't even usually hate guys for going after the money. Sidebar, we're looking at the Open Championship in golf right now, kind of like all those guys going out and getting money on the Saudi tour. Sometimes I understand you got to provide for your family, but Gaudreau's not even in that situation. And then to also not make a move to a winner, and not even a winner, not even a contender or a bubble fringe team. I have so many question marks, Steele, about what is going on in this player's head. And when you've seen the performances he's put up in the postseason, I think you and I can both agree there are some serious doubts about what Johnny Gaudreau has going on as a competitor. Just bottom line, as a competitor.
Yeah, and he also said in the press conference that he went there to Columbus to win hockey games, and you know they're
okay.
It just doesn't make it just doesn't make any sense. You know, they do have a decent roster. They're not overly terrible. I do like their goalies, Merzlikins and Korpisalo. I think they still are very young.
I like that point. Yep.
But again, it is just a head scratcher. It's like, what does he really care about? And it didn't make any sense because he wanted to be closer to home. He wanted to be playing for Philly, New Jersey, or the Islanders, and he signs with Columbus. I don't know if you saw, but if you saw the comment from Chuck Fletcher, he pretty much said that he's like, yeah, like we made too many signings, couldn't make any moves, and honestly, it was just pretty difficult to sign him. It's like, that's your job as the GM.
Literally.
To make those moves.
Literally your job.
It honestly seems just like he's on a mission to destroy the Philadelphia's organization. But because he couldn't sign, because he couldn't make the moves or get the cap space to sign Goudreau in that end didn't want to play for the Devils or the Islanders, I guess the rivals of the Flyers. So he decided to join Columbus. It's just like a weird situation. And I'm still very shocked at it from Johnny Gaudreau.
You know, he said something about always wanting to play closer to home. And again, everything that came out, there's some points in when you cover the hockey world or sports in general, Steele, that those moments where you're like, that just felt weird.
Yeah.
And that press conference was one of them. And to speak about, and we're not going to spend too much time on this topic because there is more to talk about. But my two things that I'm going to take away from this are, number one, he says he wanted to play closer to home. You had the option to literally play in your home state, play in Philadelphia, play in New Jersey. And you know what? I understand passing on Philadelphia. But going into a situation in New Jersey with Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Dawson Mercer, some of these really great young pieces that you can really mold and, pad your stats, Steele, this just screams concern for me. And we'll leave it at that, I think. And the second thing is, you talked about the impact fantasy-wise on what Goudreau can mean on some of these pieces, a.k.a. even on the blue line in Vladislav Gavrikov, even on the blue line with guys like Zach Werenski, Adam Boqvist, and others. That's something that is real. But if he were not to go to some of those other situations, like we mentioned, other teams, I would have really jumped on the button to say you have to take the players around him. I don't know right away, Steele, because still looking at this top six in Columbus, a lot to be desired. Jack Roslovic is the first center. I love Boone Jenner, and he had a great year last year. Oliver Bjorkstrand, Gustav Nyquist. So questions abound. I think that's really the main takeaway here. We're going to move on in one hot minute because the topics are getting spicy. There are going to be some discussions about where Steele and I are throwing down money as well coming up over the next few weeks. But right now, where our money is down is betonline.net, your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find all the latest league developments from MLS to Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. And it remains the best spot for all of your podcasts and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to keep track of all of your favorite sports events, including MMA and boxing. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to find out more about the trends and all the action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thanks so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Don't forget, we are free and available on all podcast platforms, which also includes YouTube. So hammer the subscribe, hammer the follow button. Flip and I appreciate all the love and support out there. And thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. And Flip, let's get right into the big signing as well. Right after Johnny Gaudreau, Josh Norris signing a monster deal, 8-year, $7.9 million contract, remaining with the Ottawa Senators.
Yes, sir.
And you and I have talked about Ottawa the last couple of days because they've probably been the second or third best team in so far to have the best offseason. Absolutely huge signing. They already have Tkachuk locked up. They get Norris locked up. They've got Giroux for the next 3 years. They've got Alex DeBrincat now, Tim Stützle, Alex Formenton, all these guys we've mentioned. Thomas Chabot on the blue line. Drake Batherson, can't forget about him.
Now Cam Talbot as well.
In the cage, baby. this team is looking legit. This team is actually looking legit right now.
Thank you, Steele. And what is nice sometimes when you put your opinion out on the internet every day for everyone to make fun of and pick holes in, which is fine. That's the nature of the beast. As someone who has come out and said multiple times, and I know you got my back on this, that the Ottawa Senators were a team to keep an eye on. And again, like you and I had talked about the Red Wings, seemingly every time I say something like that, the Senators reel off 7 losses in a row, which is okay. Still lacking on the back end. Cam Talbot, improvement. Some of these pieces in that they're got, Connor Brown, 2 second-round picks. Like I said on yesterday's show, I expect the Ottawa Senators to remain a busy team. Case in point, major signing for Josh Norris. I have a lot to say about a lot of things usually, Steele, but especially when we've highlighted some of these things earlier on the show. Oh, wait, that's right. Go hit subscribe so you don't miss a thing. But sidebar, we talked about Josh Norris in January, in February, about, and when he was injured, about how good he is. And I want to give props to the U.S. NHL development squad of scouts in the U.S. development program. Under 17, under 18, this guy was a stud. 26 points in 25 games for the under 18 team. Goes to play in the Big Ten in Michigan. You and I don't usually talk about college ranks. This guy's come from the caliber of squads that really do make me impressed. And then he's done it at every level. He goes from Michigan, putting up 19 points in 17 games. AHL, 61 points in 55 games. And then over the last 2 years in the NHL, 52 goals, 38 assists for 90 points in 125 games. And I'm going to stop with the numbers. But Pierre Dorion, once more, props due. And I heard on the radio today, Steele, and I'll get your take on this. He's apparently so popular in Ottawa right now that he's apparently had to hire someone to go out and do his groceries because him and his family are getting stopped, hugged, and applauded for all the moves. But I think he deserves that love.
Oh, definitely deserves it. Definitely deserves it. The best offseason in Ottawa history probably.
Yeah.
The entire city of Ottawa just honestly probably feeling so happy right now on where they are at in this rebuild. They know they're still they've come a long way since back when they started trading everybody off, Erik Karlsson, Mark Stone, all those guys. They've come a long way. They've made the deals this season.
Imagine they still had Zibanejad.
Could you?
Full pause.
Would be absolutely filthy.
Full pause. I know that's unlikely. I just had that thought when you were naming those players. Oh my goodness. Anyway, like you're saying, Atlantic Division, wake up. Because everyone just got better.
It's the best division in the NHL right now.
But Steele, and I'm not trying to take us off conversation here, but this is what we're going to do more and more. We're just going to go back and forth. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in trouble. And I'm not trying to take away, but we're really, everything we keep saying, and it's like Detroit, Ottawa, even Tampa bringing back key players. I know they lose Palat, but they're going to be the same. I know Boston's been quiet, so I would circle them as well as a wake-up team. But I don't need to say it much more. If you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, pressure is always on. This year makes me feel sick to my stomach, Steele, because where do we go from here if they don't make it? Anyway, I know you feel me on this.
Look, they're still gonna win games. They're still gonna be a top 3 team in the Atlantic Division, even with Matt Murray or Samsonov. But it just doesn't feel right. They still have some question marks, some holes on the blue line, in my opinion. A big question mark in the crease. This division is becoming dangerous. They're still going to be a dangerous team, but they better watch out playing against Ottawa so many times.
I'm going to reel us back into the Ottawa Senators because now, all of a sudden, and I know it was getting a little bit better, this Battle of Ontario is right back on, baby.
Yeah.
And as much as a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, I really appreciated the last few years of the Ottawa Senators really figuring it out and being pretty much a pushover while still giving the Leafs a ride, whatever. But now, all of a sudden, I think you and I both, not like we miss a game anyway, will definitely be talking a lot about these battles of Ontario coming up. We're going to be talking a lot about a lot of things, Steele. And why don't we just quickly, before we move on to, I think it's really important to round up some of the names that aren't signed yet, because that will mean, hey, even in my fantasy dynasty, people are dropping players. People are starting to position themselves for the fantasy draft season. I went out there a couple of weeks ago and I almost dropped Boone Jenner. And now all of a sudden he might be playing top power play minutes with Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine. I might consider holding on to Boone Jenner. These are the situations Steele and I are going to break down for you. The subscribe button is right there, by the way. We'll walk you through everything you need to know to stack that paper. Stacking paper is what Ondrej Palat just did. 5 years, $30 million, Steele, with the Devils. I know you and I were about to call the Devils a strikeout for some of the moves they didn't make. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this overall for the Devils and for Palat as a fantasy value?
I like it from both sides. This is a guy who is still young. He's still in his prime, and he can bring a lot to the table. He's won 2 Stanley Cup rings with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Obviously, they've got some young guys who need some leadership right now. Ondrej Palat, he's a guy that he's gonna put up 45 to 50 points a year in, year out. I like the deal from both sides. They get him on a 5-year deal at $6 million. I think that's a fair deal from both sides. Obviously, it's not the home run hit they were looking for this to start the offseason, but at least it's something, and it's a player that can produce in the offensive zone.
I don't know about you, but when I take a quick peek at the old Daily Faceoff, and I know we both appreciate that website. Shout out to Daily Faceoff for being a great tool for hockey fantasy degenerate researchers alike. But all of a sudden, I don't really hate what's going on up top for the New Jersey Devils. And I mean just for success on the ice, but I also mean for fantasy, of course. Hello, This is the Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Thank you very much. But up the middle now, and don't forget, they swap out Pavel Zacha, who was a huge disappointment. And I know he's one of those bottom sixers that's contributed. Erik Haula had a pretty good year last year in Boston. So now up the middle, I don't hate it, Steele, and I'll ream it off quick. Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, when healthy, Erik Haula, and even Michael McLeod on the fourth line. You have Thomas Tatar, Dawson Mercer, Jesper Bratt, Ondrej Palat. I know Thomas Tatar I shouldn't have even thrown there. That's my bad. That's a bit of a waste of time. Sorry about that. We're keeping the quality high. But hey, I'm feeling it. I don't know, Steele. Maybe we're drinking the Kool-Aid because you got me onto the Devils early. But I really do think this is a team that will make or break your fantasy squad if you can get the right guys on your team.
And this is a young team, too. You even look in the crease with Ville Husso and
not Husso.
Not Husso. Mackenzie Blackwood. And who did they just sign right now? I'm blanking on the name.
This is why you and I hold each other down.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably Blackwood's crease, in my opinion, though.
I'm not sure. I think they can battle it out.
50-50 for now.
Yeah, 50-50. But with Vitek Vanacek and Mackenzie Blackwood, obviously Blackwood coming off that ankle injury, I think they can battle out between those two guys and really fight to see who's going to become the starting goaltender for the New Jersey Devils. But this is a very young team heading into the season.
They are a very young team, and that's why I like to talk about a few things on this show separately. The success of their team in the standings in the NHL and the success of your team in the fantasy realm when it comes to selecting the right players. And unfortunately, Steele and I watch way too much hockey. And some of the things that I saw from Dawson Mercer and Jesper Bratt last year, Steele, and, a lot of the guys in my league, thankfully, shout out to the Hoot, listen to this podcast. I'm going to be looking at the New Jersey Devils. I'm looking at the Ottawa Senators. The Senators probably have more attention, but there's some teams here that have shuffled the deck a little bit that are definitely worth a gamble in a certain round. That is what you and I will break down coming up over the next few weeks, where you should take these players and when. But for now, I think, Steele, what's important to note is the New Jersey Devils have gotten a lot better. And regardless of who takes the share in net, and I'll round it out with this point on their goalies, it's already an improvement over last season because if Blackwood's healthy, huge improvement. Vitek Vanacek has a lot of upside, and let's see what he does with maybe, a potentially a little bit more leash and more opportunity to play regularly.
Yeah, that's something that is quite possible with the Devils. A few other guys who are still remaining right now, Nazem Kadri, one of the big UFAs still, John Klingberg, Phil Kessel, Dylan Strome just signed with the Washington Capitals as well as a 1-year deal, $3.5 million. I know you want to talk about Dylan Strome for a little bit and what that might mean for some of the players on the Washington Capitals roster as well.
Yeah, because there was a point in time where a couple of pieces on the Washington Capitals, and then mainly focusing on Anthony Mantha and TJ Oshie, where they dealt with injuries. But when those two players are healthy, they're most definitely bona fide fantasy targets. And I really do think that Strome slotting in to play on, that second line. Backstrom's out.
Yeah.
This is a move, and I know Strome can play a little bit of the wing as well, but he can play center, and he's definitely going to be playing center in Washington. But that's another one of those tidbits, Steele. Duo slot eligibility for positional. That's huge sometimes in fantasy. If he gets to play with those guys, which I expect him to, especially until Backstrom comes back, I don't know about you. This is one of those sneaky little under the radar. By the way, brother Ryan also signs today with the Anaheim Mighty Ducks, or are they just the Anaheim Ducks now?
It's probably the Mighty Ducks. You can't forget about that.
Yes.
But look, this could mean this could give some opportunity to guys like Dylan Strome and Anthony Mantha to fill that spot for Nicholas Backstrom while he deals with the hip injury, the hip surgery he just had. But there are still a ton of guys, a ton of big names actually out there. Like I said, Nazem Kadri, John Klingberg, and Phil Kessel, who still remain UFAs. Thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NHL. Locked On experts give you a daily 30-minute podcast on all things NHL all year long. Stay up to date on everything in the hockey world. Locked On NHL, your daily 30-minute NHL podcast. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, which also includes YouTube. And this podcast is also free on all podcast platforms and YouTube. So make sure you hit the subscribe, hit the follow button. Once you do, you'll get all the latest episodes of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast every Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there. And we shall see you back here again on Monday.
Peace.